In the heart of Lekki Phase 1, nestled between glass mansions and palm-lined boulevards, stood a magnificent building draped in gold-trimmed Ankara fabrics and carved wooden murals. Madame Ifeoma, known to all as Madame Ife, owned the most luxurious indigenous restaurant in Lagos, Uwaoma House. It wasn't just a restaurant. It was an experience. Senators, billionaires, celebrities, and top bank executives lined up daily to eat there, driving their G-Wagons and Rolls-Royces through the massive wrought iron gates. Her native dishes, from ofada rice wrapped in banana leaves to steaming goat pepper soup, were spoken of in hushed, reverent tones across the city. People said her food could heal a broken spirit, mend a bruised ego, or fuel a man's rise to power. But what the public didn't know was that her food could also destroy you. Madame Ife employed over 60 dazzling young servers, all women, moving like elegant shadows among the marble floors. They wore matching wine-colored iro and buba, each with a distant smile, each eerily beautiful in an unnatural way. Yet few noticed. The intoxicating aroma of spicy jollof, the tender grilled snails, and the hypnotic hum of jazzed-up highlife music melted away any suspicion. Powerful men, weary from the battles of the day, came here to be pampered and listened to, especially those whose homes had grown cold with resentment and bitterness. And Madame Ife listened. She didn't just serve meals. She served solutions. Men would pour out their frustrations over cups of palm wine. And Madame Ife, all resplendent in her flowing gold gelly and dark green wrappers, would listen, lean in, and smile knowingly. Then, if she took a liking to you, she would whisper, "Take a pinch of this ancient blessing, my dear. It will silence all your troubles." Her voice, rich and melodic, held promises no desperate man could resist. Tunde Adewale was the type of man who turned heads wherever he went, tall, dark, impeccably dressed in his finely tailored agbada, his wrist heavy with a platinum Rolex. At just 34, he was already a senior banking executive at one of Nigeria's biggest financial institutions. His life looked perfect from the outside. A sprawling mansion in Banana Island, a fleet of German cars, and a marriage to the stunning Amara Okonkwo Adewale, the beloved daughter of a prominent Igbo chief. But perfection, Tunde knew, was an illusion. That evening, after another ferocious fight with Amara about respect and interference from her family, he found himself behind the wheel of his black Mercedes, mindlessly cruising through the streets of Lekki. The voice of his colleague, Colonel Bamadil, echoed in his head. "Guy, forget your walla. Go to Uwaoma House. Madame Ife will reset your life. Just go there once, you go thank me later." Tunde, desperate for a sliver of peace, made a sharp turn toward the famed restaurant. From the moment he stepped through the grand carved doors of Uwaoma House, the atmosphere wrapped around him like silk. The scents, the colors, the soft music, it felt like stepping into another world, a world where men like him could finally breathe. He was barely seated when a breathtaking young waitress approached, her skin glistening under the dim golden lights, her smile a little too perfect. "Welcome to Uwaoma House, sir. What may we serve you today?" Tunde didn't even glance at the menu. He waved lazily. "Anything. Surprise me." Minutes later, a plate of steaming egusi soup, pounded yam, and tender goat meat was placed before him. The first taste was like a bomb going off in his mouth. Buttery, spicy, rich. His shoulders sagged in bliss. For the first time in months, he smiled without thinking. He didn't even notice when Madame Ife herself glided toward his table, her gelly as grand as a queen's crown, her eyes sparkling like coals under the night sky. "Did you enjoy your meal, my son?" she asked, her voice smooth like aged palm wine. Tunde, caught off guard, nodded like a schoolboy. Within minutes, the dam burst. He poured out his heart to her, the nagging, the family interference, the humiliation he felt when Amara demanded he defend her to his overbearing mother. How she knew he was the reason they couldn't have children, but refused to cover for him anymore. Tunde spoke. Madame Ife listened, nodding slowly, her smile never wavering. When he was done, She leaned close, her perfume thick with something floral and something else he couldn't name. "My dear son," she said, pressing something small wrapped in banana leaf into his palm.
"Take this."
"At midnight, place these grains under her pillow. All your troubles will be no more." Tund hesitated. "What is it?" Madame Ife chuckled, low and rich. "Ancient blessing. It will silence her storms." It sounded foolish, superstitious. But then again, what had logic ever done for him? Clutching the tiny parcel like a lifeline, Tund thanked her profusely, paid his bill, and left, his heart light with hope. Outside, the cool Lekki breeze rustled the palm trees, whispering warnings he was far too broken to hear. The drive back to Banana Island felt different. Tund hummed quietly to himself, the heavy tension he usually carried seeming to lift with every passing kilometer. Amara was waiting at the door when he arrived, arms folded, her forehead tight with anger. "Look at you, a whole executive, roaming around Lagos like a jobless man. You should be ashamed, Tund." She unleashed a tirade of familiar complaints about his late nights, his refusal to confront his mother, his cowardice, their childlessness. The words, like poisoned arrows, bounced harmlessly off him tonight. Tund said nothing. No anger, no argument, no defense. He simply walked past her, his hands tightening around the tiny banana leaf packet hidden in his pocket. Inside their sprawling master bedroom, he waited until she had exhausted herself. Then, while she was in the bathroom angrily brushing her teeth, Tund lifted her silk pillow, the one embroidered with her initials, and emptied the tiny grains underneath. They were shockingly small, just 5 tiny black grains, almost invisible against the crisp white sheets. When Amara returned, she eyed him suspiciously, but said nothing. She flung herself onto the bed with a huff, turned her back to him, and pulled the duvet over her head. Tund laid beside her, wide awake, heart pounding. Minutes turned to hours. Around 3 a.m., a strange sound stirred him. A low, crackling whisper. At first, he thought it was the air conditioning. Then he noticed it. Thin green stalks sprouting through the silk pillowcase, wrapping slowly around Amara's hair like tiny vines. The bed began to tremble subtly. Amara groaned in her sleep, her hands twitching. Tund sat up in horror, his mouth dry. Maybe it's a dream, he told himself, squeezing his eyes shut. But when he opened them again, the grasses had grown, weaving around her arms, her face, slipping into her nostrils, her mouth. Amara's eyes suddenly flew open, wild with terror. She tried to scream, but the vines choked her, filling her mouth with bitter green shoots. Her legs kicked violently against the bed, the blankets flying. Tund lunged to help her, but something invisible slammed him backward against the wardrobe with a brutal thud. He watched, helpless, as the woman he once loved was suffocated silently by the creeping grass. In moments, Amara stopped moving. The room fell deathly quiet. Tund staggered forward, calling her name in a broken whisper. "Amara? Baby." Her face was serene, but when he touched her, the skin was cold, and thin strands of grass spilled from her parted lips. Panic set in like wildfire. Without thinking, Tund grabbed his car keys and bolted out of the mansion, still in his rumpled clothes, racing back to Uwaoma House. He needed answers. He needed Madame Ife. And somewhere deep inside him, he knew he had just crossed a line he could never uncross. Tund's tires screeched to a halt in front of Uwaoma House, the massive front gates ominously ajar, as if inviting him in. The restaurant, usually bustling with laughter and the soft clinking of cutlery, was eerily silent tonight. The grand chandeliers inside flickered faintly, casting long, distorted shadows across the marble floors. Tund burst through the doors, his voice cracking with panic. "Madame Ife, what have you done to my wife?" Heads turned, but something was wrong, terribly wrong. The waitresses he had once admired for their ethereal beauty now moved in an unnatural rhythm, almost robotic. Their faces were frozen in permanent, vacant smiles. They didn't blink. They didn't even breathe. Tund stumbled forward, shouting, waving his arms. None of them reacted. None, except Madame Ife, who glided toward him from the far end of the hall. She looked even grander tonight, dressed in a shimmering green wrapper that seemed to shift like leaves in the wind. But her smile was wider, darker. "You came back so soon, my son," she said warmly, almost mockingly. Tund pointed a trembling finger at her. "You killed her. My wife is dead. What did you give me?" Madame Ife sighed, shaking her head as if disappointed by a stubborn child. "Dead," she chuckled. "No, no. She simply belongs here now." Confused and horrified, Tund turned sharply. And that was when he saw Amara. She was there, wearing the same wine-colored iro and buba as the other waitresses. Her face was blank, her steps mechanical. She carried a tray of steaming dishes, moving from table to table like a lifeless marionette. Tund's heart shattered. "Amara," he screamed, running toward her. But as he reached out, Madame Ife stepped smoothly between them. "You cannot touch what no longer belongs to you," she said coldly. "Go home. Bury the body lying in your house before it rots. The spirit has work to do here." Tund staggered back, feeling the ground tilt under him. The body lying at home, and the spirit enslaved here. Before he could scream again, two burly security men who looked as lifeless as the servers, materialized at his sides, ushering him toward the door. "This is madness," Tund shouted. "You'll pay for this." Madame Ife laughed, a sound so chilling it seemed to freeze the air. "Go ahead," she said, waving him away. "Go to your police friends. Go to the world. Let's see who they listen to." Drenched in sweat, trembling with fury and fear, Tund stumbled back to his car. But before he could drive off, a tap on his window made him jump. It was an older man, his face drawn and ghostly pale. "Cut the engine," the man said quietly. "You cannot win against her unless you act fast." Tund lowered the window, desperate for any help. The man leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "My wife is in there too. I lost her 10 years ago. If you wait too long, you'll lose yours forever. You have less than 24 hours. After that, she's gone for good." Tund clutched the steering wheel, numb with horror. Less than 24 hours. To save Amara, or lose her forever to the cursed halls of Uwaoma House. And so began a desperate race against time. Tund drove blindly through the streets of Lekki, the city lights blurring into smears of color. His mind raced faster than his wheels. Less than 24 hours. That old man's words rang in his ears like a death bell. He couldn't think straight. Police? No use. He had seen how Madame Ife's aura bent even the most disciplined officers to her will. Family? His in-laws were already at the house, but if they couldn't see Amara's body lying there, how could they understand? Tund's phone buzzed violently in the passenger seat, pulling him from his spiral. It was Colonel Bamadiel, the colleague who had innocently recommended Uwaoma House to him. "Tund, I just heard what happened. Bro, I'm sorry, I swear I didn't know." Tund cut him off. "Forget sorry. I need your help." He explained everything in rapid, broken sentences. The grain of rice, the suffocating grass, Amara's lifeless body, and her spirit trapped in Madame Ife's restaurant. Silence fell on the line. Then Colonel whispered, voice shaking. "I think I know who might help you, but it's risky." "I have no choice," Tund rasped. 20 minutes later, they met at an abandoned mini-mart off Admiralty Way. Colonel pulled up in an old Toyota, nervously checking over his shoulder. With him was an elderly man dressed in flowing white garments, his bare feet dusty, his eyes sharp like a hawk's. His name was Baba Folarin, a retired spiritualist from Ijibuode, known quietly among a few elites who had suffered strange misfortunes. Baba Folarin listened quietly as Tund explained, then nodded gravely. "Ah, I know the mark you speak of. She is bound to an altar. To free your wife's spirit, you must destroy the altar where the power lies. But be warned, the closer you get to it, the stronger Madame Ife will fight to keep you away." Tund swallowed hard. "Where's the altar?" Baba Folarin looked him dead in the eye. "It is not in Lekki. It is in her village, in a forgotten family compound in her family altar. If you do not destroy it before sunrise tomorrow, you will never see your wife whole again." Tun's hands clenched into fists. "Then we go tonight." Baba Folarin smiled grimly. "Prepare yourself. You will not just be fighting a woman. You will be fighting the spirits of betrayal, grief, and hunger she has fed for decades." Back at Tun's mansion, he slipped in quietly. His in-laws were asleep on the living room couch, the TV still blaring a late-night Nollywood film. He crept into the master bedroom. Amara's body was still there, lying peacefully, surrounded by withering stalks of grass. A faint smile curved her lips now, a bittersweet echo of the vibrant woman she once was. Tund knelt beside the bed, tears stinging his eyes. "I'll bring you back, my love. I swear it." He kissed her forehead gently, then slipped out, carrying only a backpack filled with bottled water, a flashlight, a Bible, and a kitchen knife, all Baba Folarin told him to bring. Kunnal was already waiting in the car. They sped off into the darkness, racing toward the family altar, with a ticking clock of doom chasing them. Amara's life, their marriage, Tun's soul, all hung in the balance. And Madame Ife, somewhere in her grand restaurant, smiled into the night, waiting. The journey to the family altar was a battle against time and terror. The roads twisted and turned through thick forests and sleeping towns. The farther they drove, the heavier the air became, thick with an ancient, suffocating presence. By the time they reached Umun's village, the sky had begun to turn a strange, bruised purple, the color of a dying night. At the edge of the village, hidden behind wild overgrowth and the crumbling ruins of an old colonial building, stood the compound. Madame Ife's ancestral home. It was a ghost of a house, walls cracked like old skin, windows shattered and dark. The gates hung crookedly, creaking softly as the wind pushed them. But Baba Folarin's focus was fixed on the center of the courtyard. There, rising from the cracked earth, was a massive altar. A grotesque sculpture of twisted vines, skeletal animal remains, and hundreds of blackened grains of rice embedded in dried mud. Above it, a crooked tree bent unnaturally, as if bowing to an invisible master. Tun's stomach turned violently at the sight. The grass surrounding the altar looked identical to the ones that had suffocated Amara. "This is it," Baba Folarin whispered. As they approached cautiously, the winds howled through the trees, and from the shadows of the compound, they came. The spirits. Figures of men and women, distorted, thin as shadows, their mouths sewn shut with invisible thread, began emerging one by one from the crumbling walls. They shuffled toward Tund and Kunnal, their hands outstretched, their hollow eyes pleading. Tund froze in horror. He recognized some of their faces. A senator who had mysteriously died, a famous musician who had disappeared years ago, even an ex-governor's wife known to have gone mad. All victims. "Do not speak to them," Baba Folarin barked. "Their sorrow will drown you." Kunnal trembled beside him, clutching the Bible tightly. Baba Folarin began chanting in Yoruba, an old, powerful prayer against the forces of the night. The spirits wailed in frustration, retreating slightly, but not disappearing. Tund wasted no time. He charged toward the altar, knife in hand, ready to destroy it. But just as he reached the base of the grotesque structure, Madame Ife appeared. Not as the regal woman he knew, but a monstrous version of herself, her geli now a crown of thorned vines, her wrapper made of woven grasses, her second face, the horrifying, grinning one, fully exposed across her back. She moved with unnatural speed, her voice layered with hundreds of whispering echoes. "You dare destroy what protects you?" she shrieked. "You ungrateful fool." The ground trembled as thick vines shot out from the earth, wrapping around Tun's legs, pulling him toward the altar. He struggled, shouting Amara's name, but the vines tightened like iron chains. Suddenly, Kunnal sprang forward, hurling the open Bible at the altar while shouting at the top of his lungs. "In the name of the Most High, the chains are broken." A blinding light burst forth from the Bible, searing the vines and scattering the spirits like ashes in the wind. Tund, with one final roar, lifted the knife and plunged it deep into the heart of the altar, slicing through the blackened grains and rotting wood. The altar screamed, not a sound of breaking stone, but a sound like 1,000 grieving souls released at once. The crooked tree above them burst into flames. The grass withered instantly, and Madame Ife let out a blood-curdling scream as her monstrous form crumbled into a pile of ashes, swept away by a sudden gust of sacred wind. It was over. The silence that followed was the deepest Tund had ever known. The first sign that the curse was broken came with the wind. It swept through the ancient compound like a cleansing river, pulling the shadows, the spirits, the stench of decay, all away into the forest beyond. Tund collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath, feeling the earth underneath him grow warm and alive again. Beside him, Cunnel wept openly, his body trembling from exhaustion and awe. Even Baba Folarin, the stoic spiritualist, wiped silent tears from his weathered face. "It is done," Baba Folarin said softly. "Now go to her." They raced back to Lagos, Tund driving like a man possessed, the city lights finally welcoming them with their familiar glow. The mansion in Banana Island stood silent under the stars. Inside, the living room was empty. His in-laws had fallen asleep again, unaware of the invisible battles fought through the night. Tund climbed the stairs 2 at a time. He burst into the master bedroom. And there, lying peacefully under the soft white sheets, was Amara. But she was no longer surrounded by withered grass. Her skin glowed with a healthy warmth, her chest rose and fell in gentle, even breaths. Tund stumbled to her side, dropping to his knees. "Amara," he whispered. Her eyelids fluttered open. For a terrifying second, she looked confused, disoriented. Then, recognition. Her eyes widened, filling with tears. "Tund," she whispered hoarsely. He broke down, burying his face in her lap, sobbing like a child. Amara, though weak, lifted her hand and ran her fingers through his hair. "I thought I'd lost you," Tund choked out. "You almost did," she whispered back, voice cracking with emotion. "But you came for me. You fought for me." In the doorway, Cunnel leaned against the frame, watching silently, his heart swelling with relief. Downstairs, the first rays of sunlight broke over the Lekki skyline. A new day, untouched by the shadows of the past. In the days that followed, word spread like wildfire across Lagos. Uwaoma House, once the pride of Lekki's elite, was mysteriously abandoned overnight. Customers who once boasted about eating there now spoke of strange dreams, nightmares filled with grasses growing from their mouths, of invisible chains binding their souls. The authorities tried to investigate, but the property was suddenly declared a hazardous site by unknown powers, and the land was swiftly cordoned off. Some said the restaurant was cursed. Others said it simply disappeared. But those who knew the truth, like Tund, Cunnel, and a handful of silent witnesses, understood that Madame Ife had not been defeated easily. Her ashes might have been blown away, but the darkness she fed for decades had left scars deeper than the eye could see. At home, Tund and Amara worked hard to rebuild what had been broken between them. No longer hiding behind pride, Tund publicly admitted to both their families that the childlessness had been his fault, and not Amara's. The burden lifted from her shoulders healed their bond in ways no magic could. Amara, freed from silent blame, blossomed anew. And Tund, now humbled by the horrors he had seen, became a better husband, patient, present, and grateful. The grasses never returned to their home. But sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet, Tund would catch a strange scent in the breeze. A sharp, wild smell of wet earth and vines. And he would hold Amara tighter, vowing silently never to allow darkness to fester between them again.